We're going to turn to James chapter 5, if you'll do that. Our adult classes and the lessons for the last couple of months have been from the book of James. And I think I'm a couple of weeks behind because I missed preaching for a couple of weeks. I know Kate preached 1 week for me. Of course, John Mark spoke last week. 2 weeks ago, LeVon and I were out of town to see our new grandbaby boy. Handsome boy. Of course, how could you not be with the gene pool that he comes from? Good-looking boy, healthy. Really all you pray about is 10 fingers, 10 toes, and health. And so we had a great introduction to Ezra a couple of weeks ago, so thanks for all of you covering in our absence for a few days. In this passage, James is kind of saying what my grandson says every time we're fishing and it's time to go. He'll say, one more cast. Just one more cast. You know how that is, don't you guys? Just one more cast. No, this last cast, this last effort is going to be good. If you look back through the book of James, in chapter 1, he talks about money. In chapter 2, he talks about money. What do we do with the money? Chapter 3, he talks about what we bring to the table. Chapter 4, he talks about those guys going into business for money, gaining profit. Chapter 5, he gives it one more shot. And he says, let me just mention this one more time, because it's a challenge for everybody. Finances are a challenge for everybody. If you agree with me, say, oh, that's right. Man, they're a challenge. And James knows right where we're coming from. So I want to read this passage. I believe I put it on the screen. Here it is, 1 through 5. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasures in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mow your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. Isn't this just an exciting passage? You just have to say hallelujah. I'm so glad I came to church today. This is challenging. This is a tough one. Because there are a group of people there that did not know what God intended for them and their wealth and their finances. Your greatest challenge to your purpose, one man said, is your possessions. That may be your greatest challenge in life. If you look through the scriptures just in the New Testament, there are 270 that start talking about believing in God and Christ. There are 371 that talk about prayer. There are 714 that talk about love, and there are 2,160 that talk about the finances. What do we do with what God has blessed us? I heard a story, and it's true as I can tell it, I should say. My father used to say those words, this is true as I can tell it, and then you never knew what he was going to say. But this is a true one. From Lincoln, Kansas. There was a man quite a few years ago who was poor growing up, and he had to scrape and claw his way to any kind of financial success. And then he started making a lot of money. He became very wealthy, had a wife, but he knew that in his selfish mind, he wasn't going to share with anybody. Even the town, they would come to him and say, please help us build a library. Please help us with this project. No, he would not help anybody, would not use any kind of funds that way, and he guaranteed, as long as I live, they never helped me, so I'm never helping them. Upon the time of his wife's death, he went to the stone carver, the guy that would make the headstone for his wife, and said, I want something elaborate for my wife, because she was the only one I really cared about. And they made this very large statue of an angel with wings. And it was just beautiful, and he loved it, and they put it there at her graveside. He got so enthralled with this statue that he went back to the stone cutter again, the guy that made all the headstones, and said, I want you to do another one, and I want you to put it on my property, right in front of the road, because I want people to know how important my wife was, but then everything else about us. And one statue after another, he commissioned this carver to make these incredible stone figures. And still today, you can go up there, you can find his property, and you'll see this whole field is full. He spent $500,000, most of his whole finances, on those statues. At the age of 92, he passed away. There weren't very many people at his funeral. But the preacher remembers one fellow there who was crying. That person was the stone carver who had sold all the statues. That's it. What he had decided was what I have made for myself. And it is mine to do it what I want for myself. And then I look at James and I wonder, why has he gone so in depth in all of these chapters to talk a little bit about all these people that need funds, and then to us, followers of Christ, to say, you're there to provide. You remember the passage in Luke chapter 1? Here's the most beautiful thing, is to visit the widows and the orphans. You know why he said that? In those days, the widows are the ones that were true widows indeed, who had nobody funding them, no family members taking care of them, nobody, no way to get finances. And so these people were the hurting people in the community. And James starts out by saying, this is pure and undefiled religion, to take care of the widows and the orphans, those who don't have anybody providing for them. This is what we do. All the way through James, he's challenging those followers of Christ to do with their funds what God would have them do. I think the whole Bible is right along the same track as James. It doesn't condemn having possessions at all. There are a lot of wealthy people throughout Scripture. Joseph was wealthy. Abraham was wealthy. Noah was wealthy. You just name it. There are a lot of Solomon. Wow, wealth out his ears. But what do you do? How do you use it? How do you misuse it? 1 Timothy 6:10 says, love of money is the root of all evil. It doesn't say that money is the root. Keep that in mind. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Luke 18 says, the rich young ruler, remember that story of the rich young ruler? He went away from Christ because Christ says, all you have to do is just sell all you have and give it away and come follow me. And it said he went away sad. Some of your versions say sad. Some of your versions say sorrowful. I looked up the Greek word right there for that sad. It is this, perilous. Perilous is where we get our English word from, this sad word. Perilous, because he was considering his spiritual, eternal reward for hoarding his own money. So much to the cause of death. That's how much this guy was worrying about his funds, because he was choosing them over what Christ may have wanted for him. This is a song that says, if riches increase, set not your heart upon them. It's okay to have riches in your hand, provided they don't take over your heart. I don't know of many people that it has taken over their heart, but I know of quite a few that it has a pretty good grip. Because we like to keep what we have. We like to bless ourselves however we can. But when you share, it does four things. Number one, it revives our concern for others. We start to see that people not as well off as us, sometimes as well off, sometimes more well off than we are, need some help. And we begin to have concern for others. You know, the first word that Jesus is described as part of his character. It said, and he had compassion on people. And if you look at Matthew, you see the word compassion over and over again. The people were up on the hillside like sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion on them and fed them. That just occurs so often. And the crippled man was there, and he had compassion on him. And this is what I'm talking about. Our compassion quotient is supposed to imitate that of Christ. Our compassion for other people. Our compassion for the poor and the sick and the lame and the hurting and the spiritual hurting. Our compassion is what God is looking for. Sharing revives our concern for others. Sharing shows contentment in Christ. It's not that we lower our standard of what finances mean to us. It's that we higher our dependence on God for whatever we need. When we give to other people, when we share for our wealth to other people, it simply is to say, I might not have enough at the end of the month, but God will provide. I think that's where a lot of us are. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen at the end of the month. Actually, the month lasts a little longer than the paycheck does sometimes. But it's us saying, I'm going to give, even though it might hurt, because I know God's going to take care of it. And he does. He does take care of it. Especially when we sacrifice. Especially when we give and it doesn't make sense. Sharing does another thing. It displays partnership with God. How do you think he intends the people of this world who are poor to be fed, to be taken care of? How is his number one way of taking care of those people that are poor? How do you think? It's us. It's his people taking care of individuals. We are the hands of God. We are the feet of Christ. We are the pocketbook of the Savior. We take care. I had a man come to me one time and he said, I don't know why we have benevolence programs in church. And we have benevolence programs, and we give a lot of clothes to people and food to people and even funds when they need it. But he said, I don't know why we do that. Why don't we each individually take care of that instead of having to do it through the church? I think he's got a point. Now, it's okay to give to the church, and we do a lot of good because a lot of people just know to connect with the church. But individually, God calls us individually to share what we have every time we get a chance. And he's going to take care of us because we're taking care of other people. And here's the last one. I had to throw this up. I don't really want to get into this discussion because a lot of people will give so that God will give to them. You know those stories. But here it is, sharing pays dividends back. Now, you don't do it to get what God's going to give you back. Whether he does or not, we should be givers, sharers with those in need. But here's the scripture that is burned into my soul. Give, and it will be given to you. It will pour it into your lap. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. For by the standard that you measure it, it will measure back to you. Give, and it will be given back to you. Pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. So when's the last time you gave to somebody? Just let it overflow. Just give everything in your wallet to whoever comes by. Just share whatever you can. At every hour. When's the last time you did that? I think that we are people who really like the passage that says, be good stewards. All right? Be good, and we are to be good stewards. I believe in that. Get a good budget, live on the budget. But what happens if we don't? What happens if we break our budget to help somebody else out? What happens to you? Have you ever missed a meal because you gave to somebody else? By the way, in this first century when James was writing, there were three things that noted a wealthy person. The first thing was grain. If you had any kind of way of producing a crop, you were one of the wealthy people because there were those people that grew crops and there were those people that worked the crops. And if you remember in our passage, it said, those who have the crops are not paying appropriately those who are working the fields. So that was number one. If you had any way of getting grain for your belly, we don't miss many meals. By the way, has everybody made lunch plans? Have you made lunch plans? Lavonda's not been home for a couple of weeks because of this grandbaby. And so she's cooking for everybody today. Come on over to the house, and you can just eat to your heart's content. Wouldn't it be great if we all did that? Next week it's at Bill's house. The next week's at Buddy's house. Just feed everybody. We don't skip any meals. Do you know what one of the fasting rules was? When you fast, share what you might have paid for your own food with somebody else. Did you know that was part of the fasting scene? When we give up a meal, we help others with what we would have fed ourselves. Number one, do you have grain? Number two, do you have clothes? If you had more than one outfit, then you were above average in James's day. Most people had one, maybe two at the most. One was average, two was above average. But if you had all the clothes, more than 2 garments, you were a wealthy person. Hold your hand up if you have less than 1 garment. I don't know what you look like today. We're loaded. Our closets need cleaning out every spring and summer and winter or fall, if you really want to know. We have an abundance of clothes. James would look at us as billionaires. We don't hurt for food. We don't hurt for clothes. The third thing that people had in those days, a few, was gold, silver, some kind of precious metal, jewelry, things like that. Those were the extremely wealthy. I'm looking around at earrings, at watches, at necklaces, and on some of you girls too. People of God, we are wealthy beyond what people can understand of that day. We are loaded. I know our 401ks this year have done very well. Both dollars I had have doubled. But what if we were people that said, my neighbor is more important than my 401k at the time? What if we were those guys that said, I'm going to take care of the person that I saw on the street who needs clothes or food or Jesus Christ? What if I was that kind of person? That guy with a heart of compassion that says, God has blessed me incredibly, I'm going to give. The average Christian in the American world gives about 3% to their local church. I want to encourage you to do that. We'll give another 3% to those people that aren't in the church, that are people in the community or people that you know or relatives down the road. Just share and see what happens. See what God does for you. Not saying we're doing it so that God blesses us. We're doing it anyway because that's who we are. We're disciples of Jesus Christ. We just give. We share. And we give away our refrigerators if somebody needs one. Or give away our couches if somebody needs one. We do that. I know some of you do that. But grab the heart of compassion. Everybody. And James said, here's where it begins. You get to see who's in control of your heart when you figure out who's in control of your wallet. We share because Jesus Christ himself shared. When God people get involved in the lives of others, there's no crying. Did you know there were 3 people crying, 3 entities crying in this passage, James chapter 5? The first group of people were the ones that were wealthy because they weren't sharing any of it. They were hoarding it. And James says, you guys have a real reason to cry. Because that mourning is because eternally you know you're going to be lost because you don't share anything. That's the first group. The second, the money, he says, the money that you did not share, it cries out to God. because it's a testimony against you. And the third criers were the ones that weren't getting what they needed in life. They weren't being recipients of the sharing. A lot of crying going on in James chapter 5, but when God's people get involved, people stop crying. We stop crying as God's people because we've not hardened our hearts and hoarded our wealth. We've not done that. We're glad to give. We're not being really sorry for it. If you give and you're really sorry for giving, then it's like you didn't give at all. We're not crying anymore because we're sharing like God wants us to share. There's no crying out by our money except that, hey, these guys are using what you blessed them with well. We shared it well. So our money stops crying out to God as testimony to us. The third crying, no crying for those, by those in need. Because we have been able to bless them because God has blessed us. I know that I'm a couple of weeks late with this presentation. Most of you that came to the adult Bible class studied this a couple of weeks ago. And I should have gone fast forward a couple of weeks to get caught up with everybody. But I had to stop to say, James says, this makes a difference in your Christian walk. How we share or how we learn. Yvonne and I, since our first couple of weeks of marriage, we have continually disagreed on only one thing. Only one thing. What are our needs and what are our wants? Does anybody agree that they've had those same challenges in life? What do we really need? What do we really want? That's a hard one, church. Individually, husbands and wives have a hard time with this, getting on the same page. But even if you're single, you're going to have a hard time your whole life with this one. For the first time, I want you to consider looking at the other people's needs above your own. That's what Jesus Christ did, right? There was a man that had a great amount of wealth. And a friend of his came over to visit. And this man was older, and he was sick, and he was still kind of a hoarder of his money. And so the man brought him to his friend brought him to the window. And he lived in a high-rise apartment. And he opened the blinds, and he looked out over the street. And he asked the man, what do you see down there? And he said, well, I see people everywhere. People on every block. A lot of people that live down there on the street. And then his friend brought him to the mirror that was next to the window. And he said, what do you see now? He said, I only see myself. And then his friend said, do you know what separates the two views that you have of life? One, all these people in need, and one only yourself. You see, there's a little bit of silver that's spread on the back of this glass that we call a mirror. The only difference between the window and seeing the needs of other people and the window that has the silver on the back of it where you only see yourself is there's been a little too much silver in your life. And when you see the silver, you see yourself. But when you see with the blinds thrown back, the needs of the people around you, and you have the heart of Jesus Christ, the compassionate heart of Christ, you can't help but share. Let it overflow. Let your focus be on other people and not yourself. And the reason we do that is because of this passage. For God so loved, say it with me, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. The reason, the number one, the top explanation of Jesus' life was he was a man of compassion is because his Father, who happens to be our Father, is a God of compassion. For God so loved that he And now we must pray. Let's bow. Our Holy Father, we thank you for being a giving God who sacrificed so much. How hard it must have been to see your Son on that cross in anguish. But you gave because we needed it. So, Father, help us develop a heart that says we're going to give. We're going to share. Because that's who we are. That's who Christ was. And that's who you are. And Father, we'll have a lot to talk about when we join you in heaven. But I pray that what we give others will encourage them to come closer to you also. Help us to be those who give. Through Christ we pray. Amen. It was because of Christ and the cross that all of us are here. And all of us are blessed spiritually. And if you've been baptized into Christ, born again, I want to encourage you to develop a heart that looks like Christ's heart. If you've not been someone baptized into Christ to put on Jesus Christ, you will never get that heart. Be born again if you've not. If you've not been someone who gives, you've been hoarding what God has blessed you with. We'd love to pray for you today. Come to the front, let us pray for you. God bless the church as we conquer this ability to give like God. Let's stand and sing together.